The words guilty, they're expected to be heard twice this morning inside a Riverhead courtroom.
It is hard to believe that cab fares could go any higher, but start believing that's because a proposal is out there. So many people do remember that day. I certainly do. I was a student, and I remember thinking at the time, who on earth would want to kill John Lennon?
Harry, good evening. The mayor's been talking about laying off 6,000 teachers now for months, but there was always really a glimmer of hope that with some lobbying in Albany and Washington, that may not come to pass.
We've spoken to the Office of Emergency Management, and they want us to take this very seriously. They are not standing down. Meanwhile, Carl Palladino picked up an 11th hour endorsement yesterday. Former Governor Pataki endorsed him. You may remember earlier in the campaign, Palladino had called Pataki a degenerate idiot. That's the latest this morning from Mount Kisco. Back now to you, Heather and Antoine in the studio.
Politics can make some strange bedfellows, can it, Carolyn? All right.
London's security network is extensive. It's known as the Ring of Steel, and for good reason. There are checkpoints coming in and out of the city. There were superstars here, rock stars, Hollywood legends, models, supermodels, every designer you can name, and they were all here to honor and pay tribute to the fashion genius of the late Alexander McQueen, but also to honor the New York spirit.
I will. Heather and Steve, good morning to both of you. The words guilty, they're expected to be heard twice this morning inside a Riverhead courtroom. Eric Nyberg, the attorney for the accused pharmacy killer David Laffer, says his client will plead guilty to murder charges later this morning. And sources are telling me so will Laffer's wife, Melinda Brady. But even so, no deal is expected to be cut for Laffer.
The horrific case of the Medford pharmacy massacre will not drag on. Both defendants expected to avoid trial and enter guilty pleas today. For David Laffer, who was allegedly caught on security tape murdering the Haven Drugs pharmacist, his assistant, and 2 customers, there's little doubt he'll get the maximum, life without parole.
He did it. He did all of this.
But the fate of his wife, Melinda Brady, uncertain. Prosecutors say she admits she helped plan the Father's Day robbery, drive the getaway car, invent an alibi, and bury the evidence. The motive? Painkillers for her addiction. But she claims she didn't know her husband had a gun and faces only robbery charges.
Miss Brady has told the detectives at the time of her arrest that she just did not know that her husband had gone to the store with a gun.
Brady could get up to 25 years with a minimum of 5 years. Family members of the victims, pharmacist Raymond Ferguson, assistant Jennifer Mejia, and customers Jamie Tissetta and Brian Sheffield say they're relieved they'll be spared a trial, but are disappointed Brady's not also charged with murder. Tissetta's brother says he hopes Laffer rots in hell.
So if David Laffer's not getting any kind of plea deal, why the guilty plea so soon after the crime? Well, it is possible that he too wants this ordeal over quickly, but it's also possible, Heather and Steve, that his admission in court could actually help his wife if it supports her claim that she was unaware he had a gun. But we'll know a lot more after 11 o'clock this morning. That's when this plea is scheduled. Heather?
Good morning. Still so many questions about this terrible tragedy. As you said, 14 people dead, 6 people still really clinging to life here at Jacobi Medical Center, and we still really don't know what caused this terrible crash. One of those injured, the bus driver, Ofidel Williams, was released late last night from St. Barnabas Hospital. He has not yet spoken publicly. He has, though, been interviewed by investigators, and his story just not jibing with what passengers and witnesses are saying. The bus driver is saying that he was clipped by an 18-wheeler, a tractor trailer, but passengers and witnesses say that the tractor trailer was actually behind the bus and that the bus swerved several times for no reason. The results catastrophic. The bus was returning from the Mohegan Sun Casino. It was headed to Chinatown. It crashed into the guardrail Saturday morning about 5:30 in the morning going south on I-95. It toppled over. As Dick saw, the steel signpost went right through the roof, grazing the top, shearing open the top of the bus. 14 people dead. Police Commissioner Ray Kelly spoke with us earlier on Good Day New York. He said that it does not appear so far that the bus and the tractor trailer made contact with each other.
No indication. Our AIS investigators went on top of the bus, took a look at it, saw no damage. I think the truck also was looked at, no damage to indicate that any significant striking took place. But this is all going to ultimately come out with the in-depth investigation being done.
So several developments today. The NTSB expected to give us an update. They're also looking into several tools, GPS. They're also looking into video that was mounted. There was a camera mounted on the bus that'll help them as well. And they're looking into the possibility of driver fatigue and worldwide tours. What is their policy on fatigue and resting drivers when they make these runs to the casino and back to New York? And also, not all the victims have been identified. We now know that 2 of the dead still unidentified, and there is an Asian man in his 50s here at Jacoby Medical Center. He hasn't been identified yet as well, and nurses tell me the reason is because he's heavily sedated. He's not able to talk. And finally, I've been speaking this morning with nurses and doctors, and they tell me that it was just a terrible scene. They worked feverishly as all these victims came here on Saturday. There were 17 in all. They say many of them arrived without limbs. Just a horrific scene here. And they just want people to know how hard they worked, and they're still working on 6 people here in critical condition. That's the latest this morning from Jacoby Medical Center. Rosanna and Dick, back to you. Brace yourselves for thousands of people walking over the Brooklyn Bridge. That's going to happen at about 11 o'clock with bullhorns and signs, and most of them will be firefighters and community leaders as well. They're all trying to send a loud and clear message to City Hall, to the mayor, that these proposed cuts of 20 fire companies could cost lives. And take a look at what the Uniform Firefighters Association thinks of the mayor. They're depicting him as the Grim Reaper. They say that these cuts will increase response time and cost lives. And they also say that the city will lose revenue because of fire losses. Have a listen.
If there's a business around the corner from a closed firehouse and there's a fire, if there are not enough resources there quickly, that business may be completely under, instead of, if they had a fire and we were there, they'd be out of business for a week.
As for the mayor's side of it, we've been listening to that for months. He says these cuts are necessary because the city facing a $600 million budget deficit. He had this to say: it would have been nice if we would have seen these same protests and passion when the state was cutting more than $1 billion from the city, which is the reason we need reductions at the FDNY and across city government. He says these cuts will save the city $55 million because positions won't be refilled. It is not too late for the city to change the fate of these fire companies. They have yet to vote on this, and if they can miraculously come up with money, some of these fire companies could possibly still be saved. That's the latest this morning from outside City Hall. Greg, Rosanna, back to you.
Carolyn, what time does this thing start again?
11 o'clock for the march across the Brooklyn Bridge, and then at noon, a massive rally right here behind me at City Hall Park.
All right. Okay. Copy that. Thank you.